All right, my presentation is titled Designing Information Gap Exercise and Web Pages for Synchronized Online Courses. To give you a background, I teach Japanese, online Japanese, 100% online course from Georgia Tech. And my main audience is the Georgia Tech students, of course, and occasional outside external students from other universities. And the class size is typically around 10 at most, although we could have a little more, but our average participants is about between 5 and 10 students per class. So that's how that's the background information that you need, and that's the context in which I developed this kind of information gap exercise. And it's a synchronized online course. That means we use software called Adobe Connect. It's similar to Zoom. It can, again, provide similar interface, including screen sharing and sharing documents and so on. Okay, in a typical virtual classroom, we can view or edit the same shared file that you have uploaded prior to the class. And in each virtual classroom, typically emphasis is on sharing something. People will see the same thing at the same time in real time. And within this environment, it's sometimes very hard to hide parts of information because everybody is looking at the same thing. How do you deliver a different image or different information to the students so they can start communicating about the differences and make some interesting conversation based on that? So that's where I started to wonder, what can we do in a virtual classroom? It's rather complicated to think about how to set it up. So this is an information gap exercise. Typically, that means each student will be exposed to a different type of different information. If it's a visual information, we may be looking at something like a different photograph for each student. Some people would see, for example, this is a cat example. Some people would see a white cat, gray cat, or cat with 3 different colors and so on. And they want to communicate about the cat they have seen in the photograph. Okay, and that this gap or differences creates the reason for students to communicate, some motivation to resolve the given task in a meaningful way. And it requires them to collaborate to do this task as a has a common purpose. So when I decided to somehow enable this or implement the idea, I started to think about, what do we need to do? These are important considerations to make. For example, we need to minimize the need to download and open something in a separate application. Although this is technically possible, but if the setup is very complicated, chances are that some glitches may occur on the way. Some people may fail to download, or something is corrupted, or the application will not run, that kind of thing. So we have to minimize the need for that. Okay. And the second consideration is the information should be revealed on demand. It should be very easy to access, hopefully with a single click. Okay, and student can see what they need to see, and that information should be hidden from all the rest of the student. So how do you create that kind of difference, even though they're exposed to the same material? Okay, the third consideration, we need to have a way of keeping track of new information delivered by others. So we can look at the overall record of what has been already communicated, and somebody is keeping track of what's being said, and that information should also be easy to keep. So some kind of a record keeping function must be there. And the fourth consideration, the experience should be the same or close enough for everyone, regardless of the operating system they're using or application. And lately, some students are accessing our online class through mobile devices. I ask them actually to use computer because that gives the greatest flexibility in terms of interaction. But some people are too busy or maybe driving on the way home and they couldn't make it in time, so they started to join the online class through their cell phone. That could happen. That happened a few times in the past. So even in that, under that circumstance, I'd like that person to experience close enough um, information or the display and be able to talk at the same time. Okay, and the rest here about this source file Japanese text information, this is not relevant if you're not using Japanese. And I recently discovered that there's a font issue. If you want to stick with certain Japanese font, when you are teaching Japanese, and if this font is not deliverable, if the student computer does not have that font, how do you manage to still enable that font on that student device, even if it doesn't have the same font? And the technology exists to do this. And considering all of this, I came up with the picture in the middle here is the actual activity screen for InfoGap exercise I created. And my choice to all of that consideration is a web page based exercise. It's a combination of two things basically, HTML5 code plus JavaScript. And that seems to give me all the functionality that I needed. So that's how I decided, and I'm also a little bit I have enough practice in writing these things, so that wasn't too big of a hurdle for me to incorporate it into my class. Also, this HTML5 and JavaScript, that combination is a rather platform independent um, way of delivering the information. You don't really need to worry about whether some file that you created can be seen correctly or can be opened by the computer they're using and so on. Even if you have PowerPoint files, sometimes I created a PowerPoint file in the past and made it possible to download it. But when they download it, something is missing, or some video, for example, is not showing up correctly, or it's entirely missing, that kind of thing. If I included audio in it, they can't hear the audio. So that kind of glitches may occur if they need to download something and open that file in their own computer environment. So how do we deal with that? And if you have a web page, all the information can be extracted from various sources within the web, and it should work pretty much the same way for all people as long as they use a compatible browser. And these days, uh, regardless of which browser you use, typically they seem to share, or they seem to have the same kind of experience. They don't have to really the screen display is pretty much standard and similar enough. So that's my decision. And this is the organization of the current InfoGap exercise. InfoGap exercise, it's on the last slide of this file. This is actually starting with one web page on the far left here. Okay, and it has three separate links to seven separate pages. Each one can be slided back and forth by using the control at the bottom here. There's an arrow to go to the next slide. It's almost like a PowerPoint here. So I created those. The first one introduces a grammar review. And then there are a couple of grammar activities, basically multiple choice questions to make sure that they follow, or they can understand, or they can choose the correct answer based on the grammar explained here. And the last activity is the info gap exercise. Along with this main line of slides, I call them main slides. We have 7 of them. There's also another alternate slide. It's like a second track. And this is an optional slide. You don't have to prepare a page for each slide separately, but I chose to add one extra alternate slide for slide number 7 where info gap exercise is listed. Okay, so that's the setup I have. And this is how it would look. And this is activity is called Who Saw My Missing Cat? And this is the situation where you need to actually start communicating each other to resolve the problem. Someone's cat, in this case, speaker A's cat is missing. The others are saying they saw a stray cat a while ago. So I assign each student to these roles here, and the 10 student names can be written in each block here for A, B, C, and so on. A is always the owner of a missing cat, okay? And you can write down the name of each person in the class like this. And while I'm writing them, before doing this, I ask them to actually, I give this URL to all the students so they are asked to open the same page. We will actually try this right after the general description of this page. So they will open their own page. They can look at the same page in their own environment, in their own browser. And while I'm sharing the screen with the students, I write down the student name here, assign Tom to be person A, owner of the missing cat, and so on. Fill in the blank, and I ask the student to do the same. Also, I ask them, if you're playing A, you're only allowed to click on this link. Click if you're A, click if you're a B, and so on. So by clicking on each link, they can actually see their own cat in their own browser without really revealing what they're seeing to others. Okay? And of course, the instructor knows which person had seen A's cat prior to the quiz or prior to the exercise. So let's see, what they can do with this is if you're playing A or if you're B, click on that. If you happen to click on B, for example, you will see a picture like this. So if you see that, you can orally converse, talk with the owner of the cat, and the owner asks, what kind of cat did you see? And you reply by using the grammar pattern just introduced prior to this activity. It's about the description of past tense identifications using noun sentence or adjectival sentence. For example, in Japanese, you could say, what kind of cat was it? And you can say, it was a white cat. Or it was a cat with a white, brown, and black. You can specify the color like that. And also, in addition to that, you can ask, how long was the tail? Shippo is a tail for Japanese. How long was it? Is it short or long? That kind of thing. So when you communicate that information, the person who are listening, can click on each of this box. These are the colors for each cat. So this cat has 3 colors, white, brown, black. And this cat has a rather long tail, so you can leave it like that. If it's a short tail, then you can click on it and the picture changes to a short tail like that. So this is a way of managing the information delivered from each participant. And they can look at it and see the features of the cat rather quickly, and it's organized in a rather easy way to grasp the overall picture of who saw what kind of cat. So that's the setup. Okay, and this is the alternate slide. If they are lost, what to say, what kind of a conversation they should be making, they can click on this button. This is called it's like a toggle, show the alternate slide button here, the one that with a circle. They can quickly see the target conversation. So it shows this, do this kind of conversation. What kind of cat was it? It was white. Or what was the tail short? No, it wasn't short, or that kind of thing. So that's the alternate picture. Now at this point, we can actually try this. Okay, I will go through the procedure one more time. The first step is instructor gives the URL to the InfoGap exercise to each student, which I have done in this case. And then number 2, instructor distributes the role among students and write their names down, and I ask each student on their own browser screen to do the same. Number 3, instructor can optionally give control to someone, some of the student, as an official record keeper. And that person will keep the record and also share that screen with the rest of the class. Okay? And then the owner of the missing cat start asking questions in voice and receive what the other person has said. And other students report back in voice. And record keeper gathers information and record by clicking on the buttons, and it can be shared. And when all students have answered once at least, the owner may find out at that point who saw the missing cat. If not, he or she might have to ask additional questions and so on. So that's the idea. So we went through all the activities. Right now, we only have a few more minutes, I hope. Adapt to other collaborative tasks. My question to you, we may not have time to discuss this in any detail, but maybe there are other types of tasks that this kind of information gap design can be adapted to, new tasks. And is there a possibility of changing this or developing this kind of thing into a game situation, maybe competition among teams or something? That's a possibility I thought of, but I've never implemented any of that. And there are unresolved issues, like how to prevent cheating. It could happen. The missing cat is set to change every day. Instructor should click on all of the links prior to the game, prior to the exercise to know the answer. And should this missing cat be randomized each time it is played? That's possible, but that's a thought. I haven't really thought through if that's better or not. Also, if there are fewer students than 10, the instructor needs to be careful to assign at least one of them to be the one who saw the missing cat. So that's one consideration. And also, no checks are performed on the accuracy of the recorded information. Um, so that is another things that's still to be developed. Okay, so those are that's the end of my slide. Is there any question?